Thought I was doing so well. Thank you everyone for attending this afternoon. Welcome to the meeting of the Charity Trustee Subcommittee. The meeting today is open to the public. However, Appendix 1 and 2 of the report, item 7 on the agenda, are not available to the public and press because it contains exempt information related to financial and business affairs. So if members wish to discuss the information in the appendix, if you can indicate going through the main body of the meeting, because we'll need to ask the members of the public press to kind of leave. There's nobody here. But anybody watching will have to pause the webcast while we go through there. Okay. Just for the purposes of the webcast, we'll ask each member to introduce themselves, but I'll just say, if we just ask that everybody make sure the mobiles are turned off from electronic devices so they're not interfere or disturb the meeting. There's no fire alarm test planned for today. So if there is an emergency evacuation, please take instruction from the Town Hall staff, and the assembly point is at Tudor Square. So if we just go around and introduce ourselves, my name is Councillor Brian Lodge. I'm the Chair of the Charity Trustee Subcommittee. Douglas.
Thanks. Yes, I'm Douglas Johnson, Councillor for City Ward.
Good afternoon, Julie Burcoat, Councillor for Stocksbridge and Upper Don Ward.
For Councillor Mick Rooney. My name is Councillor Paul Wood and I represent the Woodhouse Ward, and this afternoon I am deputising for Councillor Mick Rooney.
Thanks, Paul.
Good afternoon, I'm Councillor Richard Williams from the Stannington Ward. I'm Deputy Chair of this committee.
Okay, so apologies for absence. Oh, sorry, officers.
I'm David Hollis. I'm Interim Director of Legal and Governance.
And Craig Rogerson, Democratic Services, and apologies from Councillor Dorndale.
And we'll ask the officers to introduce when we come to the report there. Yeah, Dawn Daly is taking over the place of Mick Rooney on this committee, but Dawn can't make, so you're deputising for Dawn today, Councillor Wood. We've spoken about the exclusion of press and public on the items later on. Are there any declarations of interest? Nope. We've not received any public questions or petitions. So we'll move on to item 6, the Centre in the Park Cafe, Norfolk Heritage Park. Oh, sorry. We've got the minutes of the previous meeting to approve. Is that Councillor Gorka?
Just a couple of points for me, please. On page 11 and page 13, it's, I think, the same amendment. It is my understanding that Oxley Park should also be on this list as being a park that operates under the charitable trust status. So I was just wondering if officers could just confirm that, please, and add it to the list if that is the case. Thank you.
Okay.
From memory, I think that is correct.
Okay, well, with that amendment, do we accept the minutes as an accurate record and no further matters arising? Thank you. So we'll move on to the Norfolk Heritage Park, Centre in the Park Cafe at Norfolk Heritage Park. I think Joe Pearce is presenting this. If you'd like to introduce yourself as well.
Hi, yeah, I'm Jo Pearce. I'm the business and manager. I'm not. I'm the business and partnership service manager within the Parks and Countryside Service, and I'm here today to seek approval for the lease of the subject property to the new tenant and the offer of an interim tenancy at will, based on the terms set out in the report. And to provide a little bit more context to that, so today we're talking about the cafe at Centre in the Park, Norfolk Heritage Park. For those of you not familiar with the site, this is a kind of multi-purpose facility within Norfolk Park. It has a nursery within the building. It has Age UK based there, running a number of services, as well as community space that's booked out, and the Parks and Countryside Service use that as a base as well. There was a really successful cafe running there for a number of years with a fantastic operator, Kath, who retired last year. So we worked to a date that Kath was happy to work till, which was the Jubilee weekend, and after that Kath vacated. It's a fantastic cafe. It's well kit out and a nice indoor seating space as well as outdoor seating space. We, as a service, were keen to get that put out to market very quickly because we wanted a cafe continued in there. It's really important for the park and for the community. However, because there's a process to go through, things don't happen as quickly as we like, but we did do what we could. We got a lot of input from local councillors, Councillor Anne Murphy, Councillor Sean Edmare Richards and Councillor Terry Fox particularly inputted into that. So we got a lot of feedback around kind of what was important for the cafe. We put a marketing brief together and that went out for around 6 weeks. We put together, and I'm saying we being the Parks and Countryside Service together with Property Services, we put an assessment together which was based not only on value but experience and track record of delivery, suitability of the offer for the venue, audiences, including the pricing point in the menu, and the investment in the venue, more in terms of kind of decorative rather than kind of full-on building type improvements, but the investment in the venue and their financial offer. And following that process, the best offer was selected. We did have a number of applicants come forward to us, so we had around 19, I believe, registered interest. We shortlisted 5. A range of businesses applied, start-ups, those with kind of a community bias and all with catering experience. And we selected 2 individuals who have applied as 2 individuals, not as a limited company. Julie Collins, who's the existing cafe manager at the Garden Café in Graves Park, and Kelsey Booth, who works not in catering, in a community capacity. The offer that they made was significantly more than we were getting previously and included a contribution towards the building service charge cost. So the utility cost that we put together. It's not possible because it's not a sub-meter within the building to exactly define what that portion is, but we've put together a sensible figure that we think would support the building, but also equally not make things very difficult for a new operator starting a new business. We provided turnover figures from the previous tenant for them to make a sensible offer, and internally we looked at kind of benchmarked with other cafe operators across the city to sense check that. The building is registered to the council but is held in charitable trust, and the heads of terms have been agreed, and we're working through operational issues and obviously seeking approval today before these will be finalised. So today, as I said, we're seeking approval for the lease of the subject property and then an offer of an interim tenancy at will based on the terms of this report. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody, any questions? No. Councillor Johnson?
Paul, could you put your mic on? Yeah. Or, yeah. Right, okay. So I was just checking the mics on there. Yeah, I mean, I'd already indicated I've got a few questions earlier on, but just reckon, still trying to just get my head round whether this is a commercially desirable venture or not. Indicate I'm hearing slightly conflicting information here. What are we really saying about this, the prospects of this cafe, you know, as a long-term option here?
We provided the turnover figure, so we know that the cafe can generate a significant, a sufficient amount of turnover to operate a business. In terms of value, the rent we have been offered on this site from the various applicants was lower than a different site that you might think of, such as Encliffe Park or Millhouses Park or the Botanical Gardens or Weston Park or the Rose Garden at Graves. So we know that the rent would be lower at this site because of the footfall in the park, because of the facilities and other amenities in the park, But that said, a number of businesses came to us with proposals where they believed they could run a successful business, which was the purpose of that marketing process, to understand if businesses did think there was a viable venture there. A number did. We've gone through that process, so we're satisfied that there is a sufficient level of business and income to be made at that venue.
Okay. Hence the conflict, that's the point. And of course, I mean, thanks that you've just provided some figures there for the offers of rent, which I'm grateful for, and obviously they're to be kept confidential. But I think the point is that I'm just drawing out that there's a conflict there between what you just said, which rings true to me, and what's in the attached report to us. So I'm just asking, the reason I'm asking is solely because if we're being asked to make a decision as a charity trustee, we need to be really careful about this, because I don't want to set us up for a failed cafe in the future, given all the history, and it's been very well publicised about things like the Garden Café, and that all stemmed from the way it was set up in the first place. So that, you can see my worry there. I'm just want to check that we're doing the right thing and have the right sort of controls and support in place. Do we have enough information we can actually make that decision on? Because I'm feeling it's kind of lacking in the report. And if so, what can we do about that?
So in terms of conflict, I'm not clear on what the conflict is. I think, the rental offers we've received here are lower than those in other sites. So there's not a conflict, it's a lower value, commercial value than other sites, but still offers have been made. We've kind of sense checked those offers based on the track record of the businesses that have come forward, their experience of delivering cafes, providing the turnover figures. So we've been kind of transparent to say this is what someone did there, with not loads of marketing, it was fairly limited, but there was a good amount of people through the door. So from a risk perspective, obviously it's provided for in the agreement that if that wasn't kind of working in 2 years' time, there's an opportunity to break, because for startups that can be a challenge, but we know, having included track record as an assessment point, we're not choosing someone here with no experience, we're choosing someone here with significant experience. Therefore, we feel assured based on that. And when, just to check a point on kind of, because we're going into the conversation around kind of the specific, which is I don't know whether we pick that up in a closed.
Yeah, we'll have to pick that up in a closed session. But if you've got any other questions, rather than closing and opening again, so
sure. Yeah. So we come back to that point. Just ask a couple of things. So it's intended to be out in the open. Have you got figures for the turnover figures you referred to and the utility costs of the whole building? Sorry, two separate questions. Have you got the turnover figures that you can give? Is that, if it's confidential, we can come back to it later on.
Back to that.
Confidential, okay, all right.
The utility point I can pick up, because I've not got the cost for the whole building. We have got the cost somewhere. The cost we're looking at for the cafe element is 7,250, I believe, around £7,000, which is what we've asked as a service charge for the cafe.
Yeah, that's what I said. So the question was actually, do you know the cost of the utility cost for the whole building?
We do, yeah. Property Services have done that work in order to kind of come up with a sensible figure for the cafe footprint.
How much is it?
I don't know.
Right,
I can check that. Obviously, Ian's not here, who would have been able to answer that.
Right, okay, all right. And then the other question, and again, sorry I hadn't picked up this before. I hadn't actually clocked that the independent report is actually written by Ian, who is an employee of the council. And I think as a charity trustee, I think we're skating on thin ice there. And I just noted that it was it's in paragraph 4.3. And this is, I suppose, although I hadn't got this, I was asking for a copy of the instructions that were given to the independent expert, thinking it was someone who's an independent expert outside the council. But we're being advised that the survey, it's a legal requirement under Section 120 of the Charities Act 2011, that we have to get advice, quite right, on the proposed disposition by someone who is instructed by the charity trustee and acting exclusively for the charity. And that simply can't be the case if he's an employee. And I'm concerned that we're simply not complying with the law.
I think,
David.
David, I'd like to clarify something.
Yeah, I think where he's acting exclusively for the charity means they're not acting for the other side on the transaction, so there's a conflict of interest. You would never get an independent person who only acted for a charity trustee, because there would just never be enough work to make it viable. So when it means that they're acting for nobody else, it means in this transaction.
Sure. I take that point. You're kind of used to seeing conflict of interest situations. I'm just concerned there's a conflict of interest situation that's coming out for years there, because we've got somebody who's an employee who's of the council being required to support a report that's what the council wants to do, but also it's a proposal to offer this lease to someone who's been named who's the manager or ex-manager of the Rose Garden Café, and it's fairly obvious that people are going to say this is the council trying to appease this person. Now that doesn't mean
can I just clarify that there? I think you need to be careful making assertions like that, because I think this was you've had confirmation that that's not the case, and I think you just need to be careful, because this is a public meeting, to make some sort of assertions like that.
No, absolutely not. So this is the point, and this is why it could be unfair on the person concerned as well as far on us, because that's not a good assertion to go around. And because we haven't seen any of the details about the process of who was selected, who selected, but how the process came about, I'm just conscious that that needs to be absolutely out in the open, and it's simply not. And this is where it would be really useful if we actually had a report that was by someone who's a chartered surveyor and not part of the council at all. And I'm just wondering if, before we proceed, given that we've got important legal duties as charity trustees here to deal with, whether we just need to get this confirmed by getting a proper external report on the valuation.
David, can you just confirm what is normal practice? It is normal practice that these are done internally. The surveyor's report is done for the purpose of the council as trustee, and it says that at the start of the report. The qualified surveyor's report is prepared for the benefit of the council as charity trustee, and it's done to the requirements of RICS and to the requirements of the Charities Act. So I think in preparing that, those are the matters that the surveyor will have taken into account, and the duties that are owed are to the council as trustee, and takes those matters into consideration. And that there's nothing in the report to say that any other extraneous or information that's irrelevant has been taken into account.
Okay. I have to say, I'm really not satisfied that this has been done, but I can see a way around this, because I think there's all... and so, just to be clear, I have absolutely no problem with this couple coming in, taking on the cafe. Happy to accept that is, a fair selection in principle. What I'm going to suggest is that, because there is a suggestion that we get them in under a tenancy at will early on, because I think we all want to see this cafe up and running as soon as possible. We get them in under a tenancy at will, and then we just adjourn this until we get some external advice on the formalities of the lease before we actually enter into that. So and that's what I'm going to suggest now I've thought about it.
So you're proposing that. Is there anybody who would second that? I'm afraid it falls then. Yeah.
I would just like to come in on another point, that we have internal surveyors that advise the council, and their duty is to the council, and in this case to the duty to the council as trustee. I mean, if you take what you're suggesting, Councillor Johnson, that the council has a duty in all of its disposals to get best consideration. If you're saying employees who are surveyors could be swayed by things that aren't that relevant, you'd be suggesting that we should get external surveyors and not have an internal team for every disposal that the council ever does. And I don't think that's appropriate, nor is what the council would want to go down.
Joe, you wanted to come back. Can you just press your mic?
Was also around the evidence around the process, and I appreciate that might go into the closed session, but I think we have evidence there was a process. There was clear assessment criteria around experience and track record of delivery, suitability of the offer for the venue and audience, including price and menu, and investment in the venue and their final financial offer. The the people that we chose scored the highest on all of those. There were others with experience and track record, but maybe hadn't run a catering business for a while. There were others who had got those things but didn't have a suitable, the pricing point was a bit high, or they had been working with a different audience. And financially, this was the better offer as well. So we've taken all those things into consideration. So this is entirely kind of transparent and entirely following the principles of best practice and best consideration. Yeah, we feel like we've really kind of done that appropriately.
Okay, no, understood, and thanks for making that point. I mean, I'll just say I have flagged up that I have concerns about the properness of us acting as a charity trustee here, but I mean, I've floated a proposal that I think would get that balance so we can still get them in there as soon as possible, but I mean, I'm not going to let that point because I wasn't seconded on that, so I will be quiet from now on.
I think for clarity, you made that suggestion and you moved that proposal, but you were given the assurances by the officers that it was conducted in line with all the requirements and regulations. And I think just following Councillor Grocott in, I think, you know, the other side of things is if the lessees, they would be getting their own independent advice on looking at that and protecting their, and these are the without going into the detail, the submission that they've made, the offer they've made, they'll have taken advice on that, whether it's appropriate for them. So, Councillor Grocott.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's just important to just reiterate, you know, this is an important role that we do as trustees, and I think it's right and proper that we do test what is put in front of us. Personally, I'm happy with the explanation that we've had from David in terms of we have followed the proper process, and I think that we can be confident in that. So thank you for that advice, David. I do appreciate that. I suppose the other question, just leading on from where Councillor Johnson was in terms of advertising that we were going to go out for tender on this cafe. Did we invite people to apply, specific companies, organisations, people to apply, or did we just put an advert out and took applications as they came into us?
Yeah, so we have a kind of subscribe to mailing list specifically for people who have registered interest. So as soon as we get any kind of catering opportunity, coffee cart in a park up to a cafe, the advert, there's a marketing pack put together by Property Services, which is we send out through that, as well as blanket comms on our Parts and Countryside social media sites, but there is a kind of targeted approach to catering people who want to hear about it, who have subscribed to that information as well, and we're continually refreshing that if people ask to kind of get information about that.
Thank you, that's helpful. So we've only sent it to people who've contacted us in the first instance.
Yeah.
I think that's the important point. Thank you.
Anybody else any other questions? Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. First, I'd say that we've had 19 people express an interest. You shortlisted 5, so to me that sounds like a pretty good process. So thank you for that. A couple of questions and comments. On the terms of the lease, it's a 5-year lease and there's a 2-year break clause. Is that only for the cafe operators to break? The council can't exercise that break at 2 years?
I was seeking clarity on that point before I've come here, and I haven't sought it, so I'll come back to you on that point.
Thank you. And given everything that's gone on this summer, within this overall package, is consideration being given to the ongoing maintenance of the building?
Can I bring my colleague Nathan in on this point, please?
Thank you. Yes, in line with the rest of the council estate, and there'll be a report becoming to Finance Subcommittee in February that sets out the prioritisation of the spending across the operational estate.
Thank you. And just finally, compared to what the income that was being generated before and the potential income going forward, it's quite a significant increase. So that's a job well done by the officers, so thank you. My only slight concern is that it is punitive to the operator, and obviously you've had discussions, they're happy with it or they wouldn't be going forward. But are you able to reassure us that this has legs, this project?
Yeah, looking at other turnovers across sites, across our parks and countryside, we do feel assured on that. Obviously for any new business there is a risk there, but having provided those turnover figures, being assured by the people that we're working with and seeing potential turnover at this site and other parks and countryside sites across the city, we do feel assured that that's possible.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. We've got a question that Douglas wants to raise, so if there's no other questions from the committee.
Well, actually, I've asked what I need to know, so I don't need to pursue that.
We don't need to go into closed session then. Okay, thank you. I'd just make a comment, and I think, you know, it's echoing what Councillor Williams said there. The work that's been put in and to realise the value of this that goes back into the trust I think is really good and well done. And I think there are reassurances in there, you know, with the 2-year break clause for the tenants that are going in. It gives them the opportunity without looking at a long term, and it gives them that assurance really that if things aren't going quite right. And I think some of the other terms and terms within the lease, allowing reviews of things in appropriate time, are helpful in there. I welcome it, and I think it's great that we get something back in there into the park as soon as possible. We are asked to agree the recommendations. Sorry, it's a slightly different worded recommendation. Yeah, there was a slight change to the recommendation. Recommendation 1 should read: approve the lease of the subject property to the new tenant and the offer of an interim tenancy at will based on the terms set out in this report. Are we all agreed? Councillor Johnson.
Can I just ask, can we split this up? I mean, what I'd like to do is vote against recommendation 1 and recommendation 2, but to support what's now the second half of this. So support, can we call it recommendation 3, that we approve the offer of an interim tenancy at will based on the terms set out in this report? Would that cause any difficulty?
Is there anybody to second that? Anybody to second that proposal?
I think as it's an officer recommendation, I think, and are you happy to revise the recommendation so that there's 3 parts to it?
Sorry, Douglas.
I don't know whether the tenant would want to be offered interim tenancy if they didn't know they were getting a lease at the end of it anyway. They're going into this knowing that would be happening, so I don't know, there could be a third option. I'm not sure we are up for revising the options now.
Would it be helpful if I just said, so Joe, to be clear, I was just making it clear what I was prepared to vote for and what I wasn't. But as there wasn't much support for, and by seconding that, so I think the rest of the committee has made it clear where they'll be voting. So I think the issue won't arise there. I'm just saying if we can put an extra number in this recommendation, so we end up with the same text there. Sorry, that's a rubbish explanation. David, are we okay?
I think we have the recommendation in front of us. That's the recommendation 1 and the recommendation 2. You were suggesting, but nobody offered to second an additional recommendation putting in there.
Yeah, it is up to Jo whether she wants to change it. I wouldn't want to move to voting in parts.
Sorry, what would the third option be? What was the third option?
Was it almost confirming that it's a tenancy at will and they don't have to take the...
It is, rather than recommendation 1 having both parts, the revised recommendation 1 having both parts in it, we put the additional bit that was going to go in recommendation 1 as a standalone recommendation, recommendation 3. I don't see any problem with that being the recommendations.
Okay. I'm happy to take Mr. Hollis's council.
Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. I'm slightly uncomfortable with your response, Jo, regarding this 2-year break, because it would seem incredibly onerous on the new operators, because they have an obligation to maintain and replace equipment if at the end of 2 years the council has the ability to exercise a cut-off.
I can come in on that one. I've had a response because I've messaged. It is the heads of terms of the break at 2 years can be exercised by the tenant serving 6 months prior notice. So it's tenants, not ourselves.
That was my reading of it as well. So.
I'm just a bit confused, because if we... Can you just clarify, the tenants are aware of what we were being recommended today, the potential tenants?
Yeah.
So if we are now looking to change, they are aware of what's being put forward and what's being suggested?
Yes, they are. They're aware that today we're seeking approval for a lease, but in the interim, because it's going to take a number of months to
allow them to take it, to move in?
Start now, you know, as in move in, decorations, getting ready. They can do that on a tenancy, so they're not doing that entirely at risk. They're aware of that.
I mean, I think if we're suggesting that things have changed, then that's not fair to the tenants where they've already...
It wouldn't oblige them to take the tenancy at will. So if we have 3 separate recommendations, one is the lease, the second is, I've got it in front of me. It's surplus to requirements. Sorry, I'm getting these the wrong way around. So the first one is to declare it surplus to requirements. The second is to grant a lease. The third one would be to allow a tenancy at will pending a lease. I think if the first 2 of those fall, but the third is passed, there would be no requirement on the proposed lessee to actually take the tenancy at will. It would just allow it if they wanted to while it came back here, which I think was what Councillor Johnson was suggesting. I think...
Councillor Richards.
Thank you, Chair. Legal advice, if they take the tenancy at will, are they obliged to take the main tenancy?
No.
Thank you.
So, as it stands, there's no commitment, and if they take a tenancy at will, then they decide, actually, it's not what we want, they're not bound by that.
No,
which I think is what Councillor Johnson was trying to give them, that protection, but they're already protected as it is as a tenancy at will, because they're not bound by the terms signed.
Yeah, the decisions here give the council the authority to enter into those agreements. They are still subject to the final signing up by all parties before they are entered into.
Councillor Grocott.
This is getting extremely complicated, trying to keep up with all of this. So what we are saying is we have a couple of individuals who we have selected to run our new the cafe in the park. They need to spend some time doing decorations, fixtures and fittings and so forth before they can actually open the cafe. At the same time, we need to go through a formal process that will take some time before we have them signed on the dotted line with the main contract that we have unofficially agreed is acceptable to both them and to us. So to facilitate them going into the cafe now to do some work so that as soon as they sign the formal contract, they will be actually ready to operate and open the doors. We are offering them a tenancy at will, which we can sign tomorrow, so that they can crack on and do the work. Is that what we're all being asked to do here? Because it was getting a little bit too complicated.
Yeah, that's
to
exactly
me.
it. So that we want them to be able to start that tomorrow. It's going to take a few months to pull together the lease documentation. They don't want to be doing that at their own risk. They want to know they've got something. So a tenancy at will provide that until we get the lease sorted. So that's exactly what that will do. Yeah, thank you for summarising.
Thank you. I'm minded to move the recommendations as they are in the report, because it's what's gone there with the additional the change of the wording to recommendation 1 that came out as a subsequent document. Councillor Williams.
Point of clarification. Can they trade under the tenancy of will?
Yes, they can.
Thank you.
And that's their intention, to let them trade as while we're going through the process of getting things in, to get a cafe open again in the park. Yeah.
Because it's likely we'll start with takeaway first, just to get, try and get something happening soon, but it's just going to take them a little bit longer, yeah.
Okay, well, I'm minded for the recommendation with the change to the wording as indicated to move the original officer recommendations. Is everybody in agreement with that?
With the addition of the tenancy at will.
Yes. Oh, yeah, sorry, yeah, but the change to the wording that was circulated separately. Yeah.
Just for clarity, so we're changing the word, because we did talk about that in the second addendum that was sent round, up to the new tenant and the offer of an interim tenancy. We did include that in the additional thing that was circulated.
Yes.
So
it says recommendation 1 should read: approve the lease of the subject property to the new tenant and the offer of an interim tenancy at will based on the terms set out in this report.
yes, so that's correct.
Yeah. And recommendation 2 on consideration of the commercial term, or is it just we're just doing recommendation 1 and 2? Is it that instead of 1 and 2? I'm just confusing myself now. Oh, the 2, consideration of the commercial terms of the qualified surveyor's report set out in the attached appendix, agree that the trustees are satisfied that the proposed terms are the best can be reasonably obtained in the circumstances. Yeah. I'll ask if everybody's, is there anybody disagrees with that?
So, just,
Councillor Johnson.
yeah, for the record, just as I said before, I'm voting against those recommendations, but for the recommendation to approve the tenancy at will.
Can we have a show? Can we have a show of hands for the recommendations, please? And against? Thank you. That's carried. Thank you. Never thought that'd be as complicated. Thank you. So the next item on the agenda is a verbal update on the Rose Garden Café. If you just want to introduce yourself, Nathan.
Thanks, Chair. My name is Nathan Rogers. I'm the Head of Service of Facilities Management within the operational service portfolio. And as you said, I'm here today to give a verbal update on the Rose Garden Café. So following the last meeting, a scaffolding and propping solution to stabilise the building was designed, procured, installed during October and November. We've worked closely with the cafe operator, Brew Kitchen. We assessed the implications of the propping regarding reopening the cafe, and we agreed it was possible to operate a takeaway offer with very limited seating. To support that safe reopening of the cafe for both employees and the public, it was necessary for internal segregation to remove the slips, trips and falls from the scaffolding poles and boarding, so that was required. So working with colleagues in our capital delivery service and corporate repairs team, timber boarding independent to the scaffolding was designed and installed in December. Again, working flexibly with Brew Kitchen, we worked together to complete the rest of the building commissioning, completing things like fire risk assessments, gas servicing and reducing the Harris fencing just to the scaffolded areas around the cafe that had been there, you know, acts as a security and safety barrier. The cafe reopened, providing a takeaway facility with very limited seating just before Christmas under a tenancy at will. We've continued to undertake surveys, and these concluded in January. The surveys have been published on the Rose Garden Café webpage. Colleagues in our capital delivery service are working through the data to help inform the potential cost of the options, and this will form part of a future committee report. We've met with representatives and communicated regularly with the Friends of Grace Park and Save the Rose Garden Café campaign to share progress regarding the reopening and the initial findings of the surveys. The Friends of Graves Park have commissioned and completed their own surveys, and the next meeting between officers and the group is planned for the 24th of February with a focus on the survey's findings and discussing any discrepancies between the surveys. Thank you.
Thank you. Just for clarification, we asked for this to go on to a verbal briefing because we thought it would be remiss of us after the last meeting when it was heavily focused on Rose Garden Café not to have an update of what the situation is out there. And there will be a full report coming back to the committee once the surveys have been completed. That's correct, isn't it? To look at the options for the building going forward.
Yeah, just the surveys have been completed. It's just digesting those surveys and transferring them into the options, you know, the 5 options that were agreed at the last committee and bringing costs back in a forward future committee report.
Thank you. Is anybody, any questions on that? No? Councillor Johnson.
Just say very briefly, it's good news that you're reporting that you've managed to work alongside the Friends group, and even though they're getting their survey, you plan to meet them to discuss that in a collaborative way. So that's good news. Thanks.
Thank you. So we just note that. That's just for noting that report. And I don't think there's any further business for today. Just to note the date of the next meeting.
Chair, 23rd of February.
23rd of February at 4 o'clock. Okay, thank you.